Welcome. I'd like to invite everybody to have a seat. We'd like to get started. I'm Molly Jahn, and it is my privilege and my pleasure to welcome all of you here in the room and all of you online to the opening session of our workshop focused on public trust and trust in the sciences. I am co-chair of the group that put this meeting together. I need to acknowledge my partner, Rick Borschelt, who did the lion's share, the absolute lion's share of the work in putting this together. And Rick and I represent an axis that we hope that you will discern throughout this meeting. I'm a researcher, a plant breeding, plant geneticist by training, also a research administrator, having done a deanship and also some service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Rick is a science communicator and in fact was my public affairs guy for a while. That began a partnership that we feel is incredibly important and has been extremely important to me as a scientist in revealing how critical the interactions with our public, with our constituents are. My currency was peer-reviewed publications. And in fact, the limitations of that mechanism of communication, I think, are profound, as well as the power. And so Rick has been very, very thoughtful, along with the rest of the public interfaces in the Life Sciences Roundtable here at the National Academies of Science, in building a program that we think will be extremely useful to all of you who care about these issues. We have been extremely fortunate that everyone we invited from a wide range of backgrounds has accepted our invitations to speak, so we have an outstanding slate of very diverse speakers who together will raise consideration of the topic of trust and then speak to their relationship to that word and from a host of different perspectives, governments and the public, academic. And then tomorrow afternoon, we're very excited to present 3 workshops. This is a working meeting. And each workshop is an example of an issue where public trust is critical, a place where we may have the opportunity to build trust in a zone in science, a place where we have the opportunity to maintain trust in insights from science, and a place where we may need to consider the desperate need to restore trust in science. And so we invite you to those workshops and then to the working session after that, which will be tomorrow afternoon, which we hope you will vigorously participate in. There will be mechanisms to engage those online. I think that's correct. And as an output, all the videos from this workshop will be archived, and there will also be a workshop report. So that is an overview of what it is we are here to do. I'd like to provide just a second of context because we gather at what I think is a crucial moment with respect to this subject specifically and in general. Of course, we're heading into an election where our nation and, of course, into a set of global processes where the world is facing a series of choice points. Choice points through formal processes, negotiated processes, where science is at the table. But science doesn't rule. We're in dialogue. And so this year in particular, with the Conference of Parties, the Climate Conference of Parties coming up, the renewal or the revisioning of the Millennium Development Goals, transitioning into a set of global targets called the Sustainable Development Goals, with a U.S. Presidential election in the offing, and the increasing pressure of extreme events, we think this interface between science, what science does, and what science knows, and the public, what the science does and how, is crucially important. I remember early in my career, I was visited by a regulatory agency I will not name. I was a plant breeder at the time. A certain set of new technologies were hitting the hitting our space. We, as plant breeders, were practitioners, lots of technology innovation going on, lots of potential for good and unknown. And this agency came and met with a group of us at my university, which happened to have a real concentration of plant breeders, and said, we want you to know that now would be an excellent time to just keep things ordinary and especially not make any mistakes. Because we can't handle it. We've got a really dynamic regulatory conversation going on over here that's taking a lot of our time and attention and is critically important. And actually, from where we sit scientifically, what you guys are doing in plant breeding has a lot of overlap at the least. And so in principle, there's shared space there. In fact, if we extend the zone of regulatory activity we're expected to cover to conventional plant breeding, we don't know how practically we're going to do that. And at that moment, I realized that the regulatory conversations with us in science, these are negotiated processes. And so today and tomorrow, we're going to visit the state of those negotiations between the public and the science community that literally gives the science community license. It gives us freedom to operate. This is a crucial moment because in my state and other states, I think we're seeing a kind of political censorship of science, literally down to vocabulary we are and are not permitted to use, that I find quite chilling. And while I, as a former dean, am an expert in using alternative vocabulary, I think noting that trend head-on is critical, with consequences that that may be so large it's hard for me to estimate those potentials. I also, in recent years, hold a livestock research grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on dairy sustainability. Everybody loves milk, very, very important, but livestock agriculture is an example of a zone of scientific activity that's under tremendous pressure. So if anybody's connected to a primates research lab, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I can say we're trying to meet those kinds of standards on our farms now. And meanwhile, we have the pressure of the food system demanding livestock, animal-derived proteins. And I think we're at a point now where the resources to meet the demands we're having with respect to accountability and transparency, the resources needed are not in the research community. I'm not clear where they are. So in those gaps grow scary things. I do enough work now with the financial community interested in risks the science community knows to have been told it was the unregulated parts of the market that took the whole market down a few years ago. And so we today will be looking at some new space and some familiar space with these perspectives that building trust is an explicit process that depends on human beings and the institutions they create and the choices both human beings and those institutions make. That trust itself is something actually about which we have a great deal to learn, and we'll start with this morning's session in just a minute. That it is not a monolithic feature of the way human beings work, but it operates on many levels and doesn't just happen, but can be stewarded, built, protected, and broken. And then we hope we will go to work. You'll all go to work in the workshops, in the plenary session after the workshops, and in communities we hope will form here, will start here, or be reinforced here, and go forward. So again, it's my pleasure on behalf of Rick Borschelt and I, your organizers, on behalf of the PILS Roundtable and the National Academies of Science and our sponsors, to welcome all of you here to go to work on this crucially important topic. And I will look forward to being a part with you of those proceedings. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who will describe her work at Pew and a critically important survey that has just come out highlighting some of the dynamics about which we feel we should be very concerned. Carrie, all yours. Thank you.